The room ticked on without me. Drip, drip. A quiet rhythm from the floor, steady as a pulse I couldn't quite hold. Fluorescent bulbs buzzed like a caught wasp above the ICU bed. The air carried a sharp scent of antiseptic, citrus, and something I didn't want to identify. A nurse touched 2 fingers to my wrist and murmured, "Hang in there," as if her words could mend a fraying thread. At the office, I was the one who balanced ledgers no one else could sort. Steady hands, precise figures, the go-to when the software crashed. I don't recall collapsing, just the carpet inches from my eyes, gray with a single red fiber I stared at as the world slid sharply sideways. Someone called my name like it carried weight. Sirens, doors, a ceiling rolled by like a monotonous movie reel, then this, white glaring too still. "Emergency contacts?" the nurse asked, my parents. My voice answered from a distance I couldn't measure, like shouting across a canyon. They dialed. I listened because there was nothing else to do. The nurse switched to speaker so her hands could stay busy. Calm, capable person. "Hello," my mother's voice bright with the clink of dishes in the background. "This is County ICU. Your daughter's been admitted. We need you here." "Oh, we're at dinner with our son and his new fiancée," my mother said breezily, as if I'd asked her to pencil me in. "Is it urgent?" She collapsed at work. "We're worried about internal bleeding. She might not make it through the night." A brief pause, then my father. "We'll pray for her." The line crackled in the sterile air. The nurse's jaw tightened like she was swallowing something bitter. "Sir, ma'am, do you understand?" "We do," my mother said, a glass tapping a plate, the sound carrying clearly across the distance. "We'll come tomorrow." The monitor beside me kept counting in vivid green numbers, acting like the world made sense. I saw the nurse's eyes soften with a grief that strangers sometimes offer when they choose you despite everything. She leaned closer. "Anyone else to call?" There were people I cared for, but care is delicate crystal, and I was weary of cleaning up shards. I shook my head. The movement pulled a spike of pain through my chest. The nurse squeezed my hand, quick and professional. In the hour that followed, I learned how a body can feel both anchored and weightless, how each breath can become a lifeline you clutch with blistered hands. I thought of birthdays I'd organized for them, meals I'd made while my brother earned praise for simply showing up. I let the truths align like entries in a spreadsheet. Debit, credit, balance. "Do you want to write anything?" the nurse asked gently. "In case you're too tired later." "Paper," I whispered, "and a pen." She brought both. I steadied my hand against the cold metal rail, listened to the drip count seconds I might not have, and began the first line of a note that would outlast the night. The pen felt heavier than it should, as if it had absorbed the weight of every unspoken word. The paper was standard hospital stock, thin, sharp, a faint blue line waiting for honesty to slice through. I started with their names. Not mom or dad, their full formal names, stark and precise. It felt distant, like drawing a line in ink. The first sentence came easily. "You won't know the person writing this." The beeping monitor seemed to eavesdrop. My breath caught between lines, my voice silent but the words loud inside me. For years, I'd been their anchor, their silent investment. The daughter who cleared their overdrawn accounts, who planned their milestone trips when they forgot their own anniversaries. The one who smiled while my brother was lauded for a new jacket, as if orbiting him was accomplishment enough. Yet tonight, my life could end and they chose desert over me. I wrote about that call, not with fury but with accuracy. Word for word, I recorded what the nurse said, what they replied. I wanted them to see it in stark black and white, no haze of memory to blur the edges. The nurse returned to adjust my IV. "You okay?" she asked, studying my face. "I'm making sure they'll never forget what happened," I said. Her eyes met mine briefly, holding something, maybe respect, maybe pity. It didn't matter. I wasn't writing for her. When I paused, my hand ached, the letters tilting as my strength faded. I closed my eyes and listened to the sounds beyond the ICU curtain. Footsteps, a soft chuckle from a nurse at the desk, the faint drone of a floor polisher. Life moving on, oblivious. I underlined one sentence twice. "You didn't come." By the time I set the pen down, the paper held more than words. It held my resolve, a line they couldn't step back over. I folded it once, then again, slipping it under the thin hospital pillow where it would be found if I didn't wake. My hand lingered there, sealing it in place. The nurse dimmed the lights slightly. "Try to rest," she whispered. But I didn't shut my eyes. I stared at the ceiling tiles, tracing their faint grid, and thought about how survival isn't always just making it through the night. It's choosing who doesn't get to walk with you into tomorrow. Morning crept in like a slow spill, light filtering through the blind slats, the beeping steady, the air too sterile. My body felt alien, tangled in tubes and wires. But my mind was clearer than it had been in years. I hadn't died, not yet, but something inside me had. The nurse on shift brought a tray, oatmeal, juice, a cup rattling with pills. "Your vitals are improving," she said with a small smile. "You're tough." Tough. That word had been my burden for decades. People think tough means you can shoulder anything they pile on you. My parents always knew I'd pull through. Financial messes, emotional neglect, the subtle cruelty they cloaked as family duty. And because I always endured, they never felt the need to show up. As I ate the oatmeal, each bite bland and heavy, I thought about the note under my pillow. It was more than a record. It was a key. If I lived, it would unlock the next chapter of my life. If I didn't, it would be my final statement. That afternoon, a social worker visited. She asked if I had family nearby to help after discharge. I nearly laughed. "I'll handle it myself," I told her, and I did. In the quiet gaps between vitals checks, I sent emails, made calls. I had savings they didn't know about. Accounts in my name alone. I arranged to transfer my apartment lease to a friend. My will was updated online with a few deliberate clicks. Everything I valued would go to people who had shown up for me. Colleagues who waited during my surgeries. Friends who brought meals when I couldn't stand. The neighbor who watered my plants without being asked. Not a cent for my parents. That night, as the ward hushed, I stared at my phone. No missed calls, no texts, not even a half-hearted get well soon, and in that silence a plan formed. Not loud, not vengeful in the usual sense. This would be quieter, deeper. The kind of absence that resonates for a lifetime. I didn't know when they'd finally show up. But when they did, they wouldn't find a tearful reunion. They'd face the consequences. Hospitals track time differently. Days aren't defined by dawn or dusk, but by the rhythm of vitals checks. The soft creak of carts in the hall. The way night nurses speak in murmurs to avoid waking the fragile. 7 days passed. 7 days without them. My only visitors were the ones I hadn't expected. My boss, who brought a sweater from my desk because you hate hospital gowns. A college friend who drove 3 hours to sit with me for 20 minutes. Even the neighbor I barely knew dropped off a book she thought I'd enjoy. Strangers by proximity had done more than those who shared my blood. By day 3, I stopped wondering if they'd come. By day 5, I stopped hoping. By day 6, I started picturing what it would feel like to never see them again. And the truth, it felt freer. On day 7, the doctor said I'd be discharged in the morning. My body was mending, but I'd need rest. The nurse gathered my things, phone, charger, toiletries, the folded note still tucked under my pillow. She slipped it into my bag's pocket without a word. That night, I stayed awake too long, staring at the city lights beyond my window. I thought about how I'd mistaken proximity for love, duty for care, family for safety. I thought about how easy it is to keep offering chances until you're left with nothing but the sting of being wrong. It was nearly midnight when I heard it. 2 sets of footsteps in the hall, slow, hesitant. The curtain didn't move, but I knew. Some old instinct stirred, wary and reluctant. They were here, too late. I closed my eyes, steadied my breathing, and let the moment pass without claiming it. I wanted them to see the empty bed in the morning, to feel an absence that couldn't be smoothed over with flowers or excuses. Because I wouldn't be here when they finally reached for me. And when they did, they'd find only what I chose to leave behind. Morning broke in soft gold across the ward. My discharge papers were signed before the hospital had finished its first coffee. The nurse helped me dress, a cozy sweater, jeans that hung loose, and handed me my bag. "You sure you don't want to wait? I heard they might stop by today," she said softly. I smiled. "I'm sure." It wasn't anger that pushed me out the door, it was clarity, the kind that comes when you stop asking why and start answering with enough. I left the bed as it was, sheets neat, pillow fluffed, IV pole standing like a silent guard. In the center of the mattress, I placed the folded note. No envelope, no seal, just the truth, bare and waiting. The walk out of the ICU was slow, my body still unsteady, but each step felt like a chapter closing. Past the nurse's desk, down the gleaming hallway, through the glass doors into crisp morning air that smelled of wet pavement. Outside, my friend Sarah waited with her car. She didn't ask questions, just took my bag, opened the passenger door, and drove. Meanwhile, in some small pocket of time behind me, they arrived. I can see it without being there. My mother's heels tapping on the linoleum, my father's cautious glance into the room, the brief pause when they saw the bed empty. I imagine the nurse stepping forward, saying I'd been discharged. Their eyes scanning the room until they spotted it. The single folded sheet in the center of the bed. And then the moment their hands touched it, they'd expect a thanks for coming, a note of forgiveness. Instead, they'd read each word I'd written in that stark, sleepless night. each precise sentence recounting the call, the choice they made, the prayer they offered instead of presents. By the end, they'd know. This was my goodbye, no new address, no door left ajar, only a silence they'd have to live in. Sarah drove quietly, her eyes on the road, one hand loose on the wheel. She didn't ask what I'd written. She knew it wasn't hers to carry. We passed the hospital, its gray silhouette fading in the rear view, and I felt a strange release. Like the air I'd breathed in there had been rationed, and now I had the whole sky again. Somewhere across town, they were holding that paper. I could picture it. My mother's manicured nails gripping the edges. My father reading slowly, as if the words might shift if he lingered. But they wouldn't. I'd written it without anger. No shouting on the page, no bolded accusations, just facts. The time the call came, the nurse's exact words, the pause. Their reply, and the line I knew would linger longer than anything else. You showed me my value the night you stayed at dinner. Sarah glanced at me at a red light. You're awfully calm for someone who just walked away from their family. I didn't walk away, I said softly. I just stopped holding the door open. We drove to her place, where she'd prepared the guest room with fresh linens and a small vase of daisies on the nightstand. The kindness of it struck harder than I expected. This was what showing up looked like. No blood ties needed. I spent the next few days resting, replying to messages from friends who'd heard what happened. Some offered to confront my parents. I declined. That wasn't the point. The revenge wasn't just the note. It was in the life I was about to live without them. It was in taking the time they'd surrendered and giving it to people who earned it. Deep down, I knew that one sheet of paper in that empty bed would follow them into every holiday, every family dinner, every quiet night when the phone stayed silent. They'd live knowing they'd lost the right to be called when it mattered most. 3 days later, I got the first message. A short text from my mother. We need to talk. I didn't respond. By evening, 3 missed calls from my father. A voicemail I didn't open. The next morning, an email arrived. Long paragraphs about miscommunications, how life gets messy, how they didn't realize the severity. But I knew better. Severity isn't measured by facts. It's measured by the choice to care. And that night their choice had been a wine menu, not me. Sarah saw the email on my screen and raised an eyebrow. You replying? No, I said, sipping my coffee. They've had my whole life to respond. I'm done keeping the line open. I knew them. They wouldn't let go quietly, and they didn't. Over the next week, more messages came, some pleading, some defensive, all circling the same wound. I never blocked them. That wasn't the revenge. The revenge was letting them speak into a silence that wouldn't break. One afternoon, while folding laundry, I pictured the note again. I imagined my father rereading it late at night, the kitchen lamp casting light over the words. I imagined my mother hearing a song in a cafe that reminded her of me, only for her mind to snap back to that cold, empty bed. That's the thing about absence. It's louder than presence when it's chosen, and now it was theirs to bear. I didn't tell them where I was staying. I didn't tell them I was getting stronger. I didn't tell them that every day away from them felt like air-filling lungs that had been crushed for years. Let them think I'd vanished. Let them wonder if they'd ever see me again. Because the truth was, even if they did, they'd never find the version of me they left behind in that hospital bed. 2 weeks after leaving the hospital, I stood in a sunlit kitchen that wasn't mine but felt like home. Sarah was humming over the stove, coffee scenting the air, and for the first time in years my chest didn't feel caged. My phone sat on the counter, screen flashing every few minutes. Another call from my father, another text from my mother. I didn't reach for it, not once. They'd spent years showing me how small my needs were compared to theirs. How my place in the family came after my brother's latest girlfriend, after their dinner plans, after everything else. And I'd learned the lesson well, so well that now I was applying it to them. Somewhere in their house, I knew that folded note still existed. Maybe on a desk, maybe in a drawer, maybe worn from too many guilty readings. I didn't need to picture how it felt in their hands anymore. I knew it had weight, not just the paper, but the truth inside. They'd remember the words like they were carved into stone. You showed me my value the night you stayed at dinner. It wasn't anger that wrote it, it was clarity, and clarity doesn't fade. Sarah slid a mug toward me. You look lighter, she said. I am, I replied. They're carrying it now. And that was the quietest, sharpest justice I could give them. To hand back the weight they'd placed on me since birth and watch them falter under it without my hands to steady them. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need closure. I had my life, my breath, my freedom. And they had the echo of an empty bed.